everyone, welcome. Happy Tuesday. We made it through the weekend. I hope everyone's doing okay so far in this crazy COVID world, climate change, horrors of capitalism, and all this other yummy stuff that's just wrecking us horribly. I'm doing okay. I actually finished the Warhammer 40k Battle Sector game this weekend. It's not that long, actually. I'll go ahead and share this in here. You can just kind of see some playthrough here, probably the first mission. It's a Warhammer 40k game, if you're not familiar with it. It's a tabletop game originally. You've got units like this that you take and you go ahead and fight aliens and stuff like that. Now, this game specifically is 20 missions long. I got through all 20. Kind of see that here. And at the standard level, it's at standard difficulty. So it wasn't that difficult. I lost maybe 1 or 2 units out of 20 towards the end on each mission. So it was really, sometimes I wouldn't lose any of my units at all through the game, through a given mission. So yeah, I started a playthrough on Sunday. That's just for the at the next higher level difficulty up. So hopefully we'll see how that goes. And this is a game I could stream. It is easy enough to play that, especially at the standard difficulty, that it's no problems at all. It would just be about finding the time. Actually, I was considering recording it and then just putting it on YouTube. But I currently don't have DaVinci Resolve working properly because either drivers or the update to DaVinci Resolve isn't playing well with my old video card. So I have to get a new video card, honestly, or I have to downgrade my DaVinci Resolve. I have to do one of those two. I need a new video card anyhow, but it's just a matter of when that happens. So we guess we'll see what happens. So there's that. That was pretty much my whole. Is that my last weekend? This weekend? Today's Monday. That was last weekend. I don't know. I don't know what I did this last weekend. No, we went to Van Gogh on Thursday, right? Yeah, I went to Milwaukee on Thursday. Hit the Van Gogh thing on Thursday because we were in Milwaukee, and yeah, I finished the game. Okay, that's it. That's what I'm up to. I'm tired, but I'm doing well. All right. Anyone else? How are you guys doing today? Anybody? I know it's quiet. It's been quiet for a while, but that is okay. So we'll start with this. All right, we'll start with this. Anybody, anything before we get started? We got a bunch of anti-capitalist stuff, then we've got some climate change stuff. That's basically you're kind of realizing what I cover here. It's anti-capitalist, climate change, coronavirus, and then we get into some technology, sustainable technology, future tech, that sort of stuff. So it's yeah, at least I'm consistent. All right, you guys ready? All right, let's do this. It's from Alternet. I think this is, when is this from? This is recently. Yeah, yesterday. Journalist explains why the super rich aren't happy and how their greed is poisoning our society. Now, we cover a lot of that here already. So a lot of you are going to know this. Hopefully this will get into showing us some very specific examples of that harm to them and to others, like this fuckerhead. Celebrating. Okay, we already covered it. Let's just move on. Right? All right. Last Tuesday, Jeff Bezos, the world's richest man, soared into space No, he soared into the upper atmosphere, not space. In a rocket, many observers compared to a penis. A week or so before that, Richard Branson also blasted himself to the edge of space in a space plane designed by his company Virgin Galactic. Oh, yeah, okay, I saw that. I heard of that, yes. Yeah, I saw the space plane here, and then, yeah, Richard... And then Bezos went in that penis-shaped rocket. That's right. After his not history-making feat, after his... And there's... After doing something that's already been done before many times, we should be completely nonplussed by the whole fucking thing. Jeff Bezos gave $100 million to CNN commentator Van Jones and another $100 million to chef Jose Andre, who has dedicated himself to providing free meals to frontline workers and others in need during the pandemic. They were asked by Bezos to use the money for charitable purposes. This beneficence was a type of apology for his grotesque act of hubris and ego. He and most of others of his class have no sincere sense of social obligation. Again, like we were bitching about last week, this whole thing with Bezos going into, you know, the atmosphere it's a vanity play, and it's about marketing, and that's all it is. There's nothing special about what happened at all. In so many ways, these billionaires and their space adventures during a time of human misery and rising neo-fascism in America, well, it's not rising, it's been here for a very long time. And the world is like bad science fiction turned to life. It is as if Paul Verhoeven, Mike Judge, and Roger Corman collaborated on a film and then found a way to replace reality as we once understood it with their elaborate simulation. Bezos and Branson's antics are further evidence that America is a plutocratic pathocracy that is cannibalizing itself. In this new gilded age, millionaires and billionaires have enriched themselves through a political and economic system in which social parasitism and social Darwinism rule largely uncontested. In this new world, that in many ways is an old world with echoes of feudalism and debt peonage. Neoliberalism means socialism for the rich and free markets for everyone else. True statement. Yeah, it's contemporarily we're sitting at, it's just feudalism evolved with a different name and different mechanics. In this country, we do have slaves. You know, people who are in, we have some of the largest numbers of slaves in the world, or people in prison in the world, and they are rented out for work, effectively slaves. Everyone, even worse, the poor, working class, and middle class directly subsidize the wealth and greed of the very rich because the latter largely do not pay federal and state taxes. Not only do they not pay taxes, they also gain, you know, like they're saying, socialism for the rich, billions and billions in subsidies from the government, in addition to not paying any taxes, which greatly increases the levels of inequality. With the billions of dollars Bezos and Branson collectively spent on their rocket rides to space, they could have instead have chosen. They could have chosen instead to provide vaccines for the poor around the world, rid the human race of a deadly disease, help uplift the poor and other vulnerable worldwide. Another vulnerable people worldwide, create a project to address the global climate emergency, or done other good works that would have simultaneously soothed their egos and desperate need for attention while also helping others. Exactly, and this is that whole sociopathy problem with capitalism, right? When it comes to doing something, the decision is do something that is profitable for me, or doing what's good for the world, and doing what's profitable for me and my tribe is what comes first. Fuck everyone else. They could have done what was best for humanity, but they decided not to. Of course. Because the more money you have, the more power you have, the more inequality that you benefit from, the more sociopathic then eventually, like this guy and other rich people like Bill Gates and so on, become psychopaths, willing to murder people for fun and profit. With the money spent on his rocket ride and his gifts to Jones and Andre, Bezos could have instead chosen to provide a true living wage for his employees, the very people who helped him attain his vast wealth, or given each of them a substantial cash bonus. Exactly. As seen with the Biden administration's new child tax credit does not take large sums of money to substantially improve the life chances of poor and working class people in America. Bezos and Branson could easily choose to do the same. In response to these billionaire space flights, Deepak Xavier, who heads Oxfam International's global inequality campaign, said this: We've now reached stratospheric inequality. Billionaires burning into space, away from the world of pandemic, climate change, and starvation. 11 people are likely now dying of hunger each minute, while Bezos prepares for an 11-minute personal space flight. This is human folly, not human achievement. The ultra-rich are being propped up by unfair tax systems and pitiful labor protections. U.S. billionaires got around 1.8 trillion richer since the beginning of the pandemic, and 9 new billionaires are created by Big Pharma's monopoly on the COVID-19 vaccines. Bezos pays next to no U.S. income tax, but can spend $7.5 billion on its own aerospace adventure. Bezos' fortune has almost doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic. He could afford to pay for everyone on Earth to be vaccinated against COVID-19 and still be richer than he was when the pandemic began. Billionaires should pay their fair share of taxes for hospitals, schools, roads, and social care too. Governments must adopt much stronger global minimum tax on multinational corporations and look at new revenues. A wealth tax, for example, of just 3% would generate $6 billion a year from Bezos's $200 billion fortune alone, a sixth of what the U.S. spends on foreign aid. COVID-19 profits tax on Amazon would yield $11 billion, enough to vaccinate nearly 600 million people. What we need is a fair tax system that allows more investment into ending hunger and poverty, into education and healthcare, and into saving the planet from the glowing climate crisis rather than leaving it. Yep, he's exactly right. Just as we say here, right? The United States has enough food going to waste because we waste 40% of our food supply. It's enough to feed the entire starving population of the Earth. Yeah, it's not that we don't have the resources. We do. We do have the resources, and we just need to start using them responsibly, making sure that those who don't have food have food. Those who don't have education or housing have access to all that. That's just in this country, and we can do that also globally as well. I mean, say that, Africa, India, Central and South America, they're not poor, just the West, the global North, keeps raping them of their resources. If we stop doing that and help make sure they benefit from it, these countries can do much better by themselves. And we got these billionaires, right? They can be taxed out of existence, and that money used to, like they're saying here, feeding the poor, globally, making sure people have housing, education, and also people have access to the COVID vaccine. I mean, that stuff should be open sourced anyhow. We can do it. We can do all of that. Bezos and Branson command such vast financial resources and power that they can engage in acts of global spectacle for their own ego gratification. Why are the super wealthy flying off to space? For reasons of personal glory, or perhaps out of collective narcissism and greed. Definitely both. And perhaps to flee a ruined planet, or just because they can. Well, fleeing the planet isn't actually really going to happen, for the most part. But yeah, just because they can is definitely, all these. In the final analysis, we may all share planet Earth, but the very rich live in their own reality. Michael Mechanic, a senior editor at Mother Jones, knows this well. His new book, Jackpot: How the Super Rich Really Live and How Their Wealth Harms Us All, explores that private and exclusive world. In this conversation, Mechanic explains what the wealthy and super rich understand about money that other people do not. Like, if you have it, it's great. It's easy to make more money. He shares how the lives of the wealthy and super rich are indeed very much outside the lived experiences and reality of all other human beings. Mechanic also explains how the wealthy engage in sociopathic, antisocial behaviors while suffering few consequences other than their own rootlessness, and unhappiness. He warns that no society with extreme levels of wealth and income inequality is stable, and that a healthy democracy needs a more balanced economy with a flourishing middle class. Okay, all right, yep. This conversation has been edited as usual for length and clarity. As the saying goes, there's a class war in America, and the rich won. Why don't we see any mass resistance or pressure to change this unjust system? This can partly be explained by an American ethos which emphasizes the myth of upward mobility. So many Americans actually believe we can be in the mansion someday, and when we get there, we don't want to be taxed too much. That's the phrase, the temporarily embarrassed millionaire, right? This pervasive wealth fantasy exists much more in America than in other countries. As compared to Europeans, for example, Americans are overly optimistic about the prospects for upward mobility. That's good propaganda, right? Good advertising. American politicians are constantly telling these rags to riches stories as well. Such stories ignore the structural realities of American society and the fact that upward mobility is more mythical than real. Family circumstances are the biggest predictor of a person's own economic circumstance, unfortunately. Yeah, and we've covered this before, that your zip code is a much stronger indicator of your success than anything else. Where you live, who your family is going to be a much stronger indicator of how well you're going to do. If we read these articles on intergenerational poverty, right? If your grandparents are in poverty, most likely their children are going to be in poverty, and then their children are going to be in poverty too. It's really difficult to get out of poverty. It's this trap that really just keeps on sucking people in. What does the average American not understand about the very rich? What is their world like? Well, here's one example. White men have much greater access to a network of people in the worlds of finance, venture capital, and other lucrative industries that they can rely upon when they need to step up. If you have a friend who works in finance, you can use that relationship to get funding for your business. Even to get in the room with a venture capitalist, you usually need to have a friend or other contact to arrange it. If you don't have access to that network, you are at an extreme disadvantage. Most women in general do not have such financial networks. Black people in America tend not to have access to those networks either. If you are a working class black person looking for funding for a company, good luck. Whereas if you come from a wealthy white family, your dad likely knows somebody who can get you that access. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's again a part of that systemic and structural racism and classism that's inherent to this, right? The rich people know the other rich people, and they're the ones who help each other out. Well, the rest of us don't have any potential for that. Here we go. Wealth is intergenerational. There are many among the rich who actually believe that they earned their money through, quote, hard work, as opposed to family money, luck, and access to other resources. Donald Trump is one of the most notable examples. He received millions of dollars from his father, yet brags about being a self-made man who got a small loan to start his business. Do the wealthy really believe such things? Well, sure. I mean, in their perspective, right, a few million is a small loan when you have several $billion, right? It's all about scope and scale. It varies. Donald Trump is the least self-aware person on earth. He probably believes these myths about self-reliance and that he did it himself. I believe there are wealthy people who appreciate how lucky they are. When you come from a wealthy family, it is easy to downplay all the structural and institutional factors which helped you and your family and that hurt others in terms of accruing intergenerational wealth. What is the average day like for one of the super rich? There are so many different types of super rich. There are those people that don't work, who are just socialites and go around to events and so forth. There are people who are in industry and are workaholics, but either way, people tend to travel a great deal. They have massive social calendars and many things of that nature to plan. Super rich families actually have something called a family office. This is a private company that handles all of their personal affairs and investments and manages all the properties and household employees and pays the bills. But mainly, the purpose of the family office is to make you richer and to protect your wealth. The family office also helps them to avoid taxes by whatever means necessary. These family offices just perpetuate a dynastic system. Yep. What is it like to live a life without fears or worries about not having enough money? Many of the super rich still care about money a great deal, even though they have a ton of it. They don't need more of it, but they use money as a scorecard for their success. It becomes a big game, a competition, where when you can buy anything you want and have anything you want. That is a quite surreal experience. It is spending money on stupid things. It creates a mindset of, I don't care about money, I don't need it, I can just do what I want. I believe this hurts the children of the wealthy even more because it allows them to flounder through life, never having to stick with anything. They just wander through life aimlessly. Many children of the wealthy end up getting in the family business or doing something else to maintain a lifestyle that they really do not care about, and that makes them unhappy. To me, that is a bad way to live. Because they travel so much, the wealthy are often away from their kids for long periods of time. These very wealthy families outsource everything. There are people who do the cooking, the cleaning, the yard work, take care of the children, etc. There are also consultants for everything. As one of my sources told me, I meet these super wealthy people and they don't do anything. They just sort of live in this bubble where everything's being done for them. I believe this explains why we see the super wealthy engaging in crazy, high-risk, high-priced adventure activities. There is much research which suggests that the rich, especially the super rich, and the plutocrats are more likely to be sociopaths than the average person. Did you encounter any people who fit that profile? Psychologists have studied these questions and have shown that wealthier people on average are less empathetic. They are more prone to antisocial behavior. They are less socially oriented. On the other hand, there's no data that shows the same person before and after getting these large sums of money. Thus, the question is it more that these types of personalities are the ones that pursue wealth, or that wealth actually has these negative impacts on a person's behavior? Sure, it could be both. Yeah, that people who are sociopaths, I mean, in order to get rich, you have to exploit others, especially on the scale, right? So if you are already a sociopath of some sort, making more money, or being successful can be a sum of what happens because you're willing to exploit others. But also, the more you get access to wealth, the more wealthy you become, the more sociopathic and detached from reality you actually are. And that ends up being kind of a positive feedback loop. The more money you get, the more sociopathic you become, and the more money you make. And all of that, of course, has a cost. Cost to the people, cost in blood, cost through the suffering of others. Does money change people? I asked that question of many people who are the sources for the book. Some of them said, if you have 50 million and you were a jerk, you're going to be a bigger jerk. And if you're a great person, you'll have opportunity to do greater. Essentially, it amplifies your personality. One thing we do know is that children of wealthy families are at high risk for drug addiction and low-level criminal behavior. The risk is similar for very poor kids. People who are from middle-class families are at a much lower risk for such behavior. And again, that all comes down to that inequality problem, right? The further you are from the average of society, the more problems you're going to have, the more, in a sense, sociopathic you're going to become. But it's going to be for different reasons. Those at the bottom, those are suffering from massive impoverishment and homelessness and all that sort of stuff. It's not going. It may come out through crime and violence and addictions and that sort of thing. Now, on the top end, that can be very similar. Crime, but the type of crime is going to be very different, right? White collar crime versus a blue collar crime at the bottom, and the level at which that people at the top can hurt people is much higher than it is at the bottom. So both are, those who are impoverished, those who are rich, are both at risk for sociopathic behavior. It just manifests differently. And the scope it affects is different. And this is kind of one of those things that you look at that you should consider as to why we really need to start working towards destroying inequality. Because people at the bottom suffer, people at the top suffer, right? So the best thing we can do for everyone is destroy inequality as much as we can. And my policies are all aimed at that sort of a thing, right? My economic inequalities deal with inequality, and it needs to be done drastically. Wealth taxes, right? Maximum wage, minimum wage, UBI, federal jobs guarantee, all sorts of things like that. So the more we attack the people at top to bring them down by maximum wage and wealth tax, and the more we lift people up at the bottom, get them right, get everyone right in the middle, that'll help get rid of some of these sociopathic behaviors and have everyone actually be happier. What of the children of the very rich? Do they just learn that there are no rules for people like them? Poor and working class people can't claim that they are sick with affluenza, right? When they get drunk and run over people, for example. Yep. I do believe that is the case. There is a sense of entitlement that the rules don't apply. Well, they don't apply because they can just pay for it. Pay for it to go away. Or they can just say, hey, I don't care who you are, but I can sue you into existence because I'm rich and you're not. We see this among those who are rich but not super wealthy as well. It is just the idea of, oh, I can just do this thing and who cares, right? I can cut in line, whatever. It manifests across a range of small behaviors. What do we know about new money versus old money? Well, you got higher levels of sociopathy. The longer, if you have money longer, that'll give you higher levels of sociopathy because you've had it for much longer. Professional athletes are a classic example. It's actually getting harder and harder for poor kids to make it into the NFL and the NBA, but there's still a pretty sizable number of people who make it into professional sports and come from financially challenging circumstances. They are extremely talented and have focused like a laser beam on being successful in their sport. Then all of a sudden, they're getting paid $2 million a month. These are crazy amounts of money. I talked to the business manager whose clients are mostly Major League Baseball and National Basketball Association players, MLB and NBA players. Told me about the following. This one kid, he's making $1 million or $2 million a month. He had to hire a housekeeper, someone to fold his clothes, do his laundry, because this kid has never done his own laundry. He never folded his own clothes. Many of these professional athletes do not know how to function in a normal life. They have lived in a bubble. These are all these hangers-on and others in their orbit who are trying to get money from them. It can be the coaches from before they went pro, family members, and others who are trying to get these young athletes to take care of them financially. There are a lot of athletes who fall victim to that. And if you're a big superstar like Pat Holmes or Steve Curry, then you can afford to behave in such a way. But as my contact told me, if you're a backup point guard for the Grizzlies, you can't support a bunch of family members for very long, or you're going to be broke. It happens. They get into serious financial trouble. If you come into all those millions of dollars without any sophisticated knowledge about what to do with it, the whole thing can be really disconcerting. Yep, I believe that completely. And again, a lot of these people that like playing for the NFL and then they end up, either getting fired or lose their job, or they end up, quitting for whatever reason, and then they end up broke. That just boggles my mind. I mean, obviously I come from a much different place. If I had a crap load of money, I'd pay off all my bills and I'd invest pretty much everything and then try and live off the investments. I wouldn't have to worry about working ever again. That's the sort of thing that, people like this who are coming from poor backgrounds, jumping into money like this, should be looking at doing. Then they don't ever have to worry about it. Many people fantasize about wealth. But when you get that wealth, especially all of a sudden, it really changes your relationship with people, including old friends, your middle-class friends. You want to enjoy the money, and you may also want your friends to enjoy it too. Can I invite my middle-class friends on this fancy trip where I'm going to pay for everything? Sure, maybe you can do it once. But what's it going to be like if you keep treating your old friends to these super high-end things? It's going to get weird. Pride's going to get in the way, or maybe you feel like they are freeloaders. All that money can create very weird dynamics. Family tensions get involved, children squabble about inheritances. It can become a total mess. That brain damage from inequality, right? What are the informal rules about wealth that old money understands and new money does not? Put that money away to make it last. Preserve it and do not do what the young athletes do. You do not want to be flashy. Old money, it wants nobody to know it exists. The big wealthy dynasties with their family offices generally do not want to be big public figures. Some years ago, I was acquainted with a husband and wife who won the lotto. It was a modest sum after taxes, perhaps only $150,000. Everyone knew about it because their names were in the newspaper. I asked them a few years later about what they spent the money on. The husband told him he wished they had never won the money because all they did was pay off some bills, buy a new pickup truck. That was it. But everyone in their family, friends and neighborhood, their coworkers, all thought they were rich. He told me it was so much stress with everyone asking him and his wife for money that they wished they had never won it to begin with. Is that a common experience? Yeah, and this is why, when I thought about the lottery thing, I would say I don't want my names in the paper at all. I don't want anyone to know because of all of this sort of a problem. Yes, it is. The conventional wisdom about winning the lottery is that it ruins your life. And in some cases, it really does. I interviewed a guy who was a hedge fund manager. He had a house on Lake Tahoe right next to Larry Ellison's house. And the neighbor on the other side, he was this young guy in his 20s. Turned out the guy had won a big lottery and bought this $4 million house on Lake Tahoe. He was always up there just partying with his friends. He didn't seem to have anything else going on in his life. One day, the rich guy pulled up in his driveway and he sees the coroner's van next to the door. He goes over there and asks, "What happened?" They told him. "The person is deceased. The young guy killed himself." Yeah, inequality, it can be very, very harmful. Getting that much money and just partying, have an empty life full of nothing going on besides not just partying and blowing it all. That's not healthy. When you have a lot of money, there are issues with trusting other people. You don't know who's coming at you. There are going to be people trying to get you involved in business partnerships, pitching ideas to you, or trying to become your friend, but you don't really know whether they're there for some other reasons. This includes potential romantic partners. Yeah. There was a documentary a few years back about lottery winners that showed how they got all this money and moved into a new neighborhood, and the people there did not accept them. The interviewer asked one of the Powerball winners, an older black man who came from a working class neighborhood, what it was like to have all this money. The man was miserable. He and his wife almost started crying. He told the interviewer, "Look around, all we have is a house full of stuff. I don't want to buy anything because I got everything. The neighbors here don't talk to us because they don't think we belong. We were poor in the projects, but now we don't trust anyone. We don't have those friendships or family relationships anymore. All we got is a whole bunch of money and a house full of stuff." Then the interviewer asked the obvious follow-up, and the man said, "You know what? I was happier when I was poor." Yeah, part of that is going to be living in the projects and it's poor. That can be problematic, but moving to somewhere that's not quite so, posh, somewhere where you actually have people around you that you can connect with. Maintaining that rooting, that grounding in, who you are. I mean, they could have used, I don't know how much it would cost where they're from, but you could end up buying in some way, some of those projects, building something new there, doing something of value from where you come from, and hopefully still having enough money left over in order to live off of it as well. It's not just about stuff. Not having stuff, not having enough stuff in your life, having housing, having food, right, education can be harmful, but too much can also be harmful as well. Make it very empty and hollow. It's true, if you don't have something to give your life meaning, and if you think money is the meaning of life and you pursue that path, forget it, you're going to be miserable. All right, there we go. So what's the magic number in terms of income and happiness? There's research that looked at millions of people and their self-reported happiness. Positive emotions. Yeah, here we go. Peak at incomes over 65 grand. Okay, we've talked about this. We covered this, right, with the, I haven't read the research, but we talked about Dan Price and his business Gravity Payments. He made his minimum wage $70,000 there, right? That's why my policies, minimum wage is $75,000. Your negative emotions are minimized at about 95 grand. And then there is what is known as life satisfaction, which is a type of measure of how you view yourself relative to your peers. That maxes out at $105,000, a modest amount of money. Exactly. And again, this is why my policies are shaped the way they are. Maximizing happiness. So my policies go about between 75 to 85,000 is kind of where I try and keep people. Right in there. You can get more overall, but right about there is good. Once you get above the satiation point, where a person knows that their needs are met, it's all just creature comforts and other bonuses in life. As you go past that satiation point, your life satisfaction starts to decrease in wealthy nations. We still do not know why that is, but one of the speculations is that in order to maintain this high-end lifestyle, the person has to work all the time and they lose their social connections. If you take a high-paying job and you're just on call all the time and you have too many responsibilities, there's less time to enjoy your life and your relationships. What good is it, right? You have a large bank account and no friends. And part of that, some of it might be that as well, but also is the inequality problem as well. The more unequal things are, the more unhappy you will become. We know a great deal about the poor and the underclass, but we do know very little about the rich. They are under-researched because, as a rule, they do not talk to outsiders. How did you get access to them? It was a very laborious process. I had many rejections. In fact, the billionaires wouldn't talk to me at all. They'll talk to you about other things, but they're not going to talk to you regarding their feelings about wealth. But the wealthy also have lots of middlemen, the PR people and the like, who said no. I got a lot more rejections than I got acceptances, I would say. So I had to fill in the gaps by talking to people who are on the periphery of the billionaire class, people who work with them closely in financial management, of course, but also in such varied roles as building safe rooms for hedge funders. For example, I spoke to a woman who works security for billionaires and trains their nannies in physical combat. I also spent time hanging out with luxury realtors and luxury car dealers and all manner of people who interact with these incredibly wealthy clients. What do you want American people to understand about the super rich? That they need a guillotine, maybe? By and large, they're not bad people. The point of writing Jackpot was not to disparage the wealthy, but to point out how flawed our system is in America that allows people to amass such wealth at the expense of others. The policies that enable such an outcome is driving us apart as a society. It's really tearing at the social fabric because as the rungs of the economic ladder get wider and wider apart, we're losing empathy for the people on the other side. Again, that inequality harms our mutual interdependence. There's now a situation where we're a society of extreme winners versus extreme losers. A healthy society has a thriving middle class. That is what really lifts all boats. Okay, there you go. That's the first one. Inequality bad. We know this. This wasn't as informative as I was hoping it was going to be, but there's some reinforcing stuff in there. Thoughts? Or move on? All right, so this is from March, actually. This is earlier this year. March, April, May, June. So like 4 months ago. Yeah, I can do math here. The minimum wage would be $44 an hour if it had grown at the same rate as Wall Street bonuses. Again, this is in March. Yeah, this is okay for March. Let's go ahead and get this bigger. The chaos that the coronavirus pandemic unleashed on America's economy turned out to be a major boon for Wall Street traders, according to new data from the New York State Comptroller's Office. Wall Street firms paid their New York City-based traders an average bonus of $184,000 last year, a 10% increase from 2019. New York's Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli said in a press release Friday. Those paydays have been skyrocketing for decades. Since 1985, Wall Street traders' bonuses have grown 1,217%. And that's just part of their overall pay, which is more than $406,000 on average in 2019, according to data from DiNapoli's office. By comparison, the federal minimum wage has flatlined at $7.25 an hour, or $15,080 annually for 12 consecutive years. When adjusted for inflation, it has actually decreased by 11% since 1985. If the minimum wage had instead grown at the same rate as Wall Street bonuses, it would be $44.12 an hour today. Unlike a majority of the U.S. Wall Street, like a majority of the U.S., Wall Street saw massive financial success in 2020, and experts say it exposed just how detached the industry has become from the rest of the country's reality. Yeah, because the top 20% own the majority of, top 20% own like, or 10% own like 80% of the stocks, right? So when most of the rich own most of the stocks and people are suffering, depressions, recessions, bad things like this happening is a time for the rich to make an incredible amount of money. This is their favorite time ever. Because as businesses go out, they can purchase them. Houses go, people lose their houses due to foreclosure. They can buy them. It's just an amazing time to make an incredible amount of money. And that's, part of that pursuit, how they become detached from the rest of the reality is that all the money that they make, especially during a time like this, comes on the back of the suffering of others. It just becomes about that pursuit of money instead of helping others. It's just another reminder that there's a total disconnect between what happens on Wall Street and what happens in people's everyday lives and in the real economy. Sarah Anderson, the director of Global Economy Program at the Institute for Policy Studies, a left-leaning think tank, told Insider. Yep. Wall Street bonuses soar while minimum wage remains flat. So here we go. Here's the... Okay, there's minimum wage. And there's bonuses. Blunk, 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 blunk. Jumping, jumping, jumping. It's crazy. Again, it's that the stock is not a stock market. GDP isn't a good representative of how well the country is doing because it has nothing to do with the inequality, nothing to do with poverty, nothing to do with homelessness or food or education or any of the other things that actually, any other metric that tells us how well the people are actually doing. All it tells us is how rich the rich are getting. So we need to stop looking at that because it doesn't really matter to the people. Doesn't matter to the 99%, right? It only tells us how the 1% is doing. Stock market blew past pre-pandemic levels months ago as millions of Americans still struggled to find work, while increased volatility in the markets led to record years for Wall Street firms that netted bank executives paydays of up to $33 million, even as many banks laid off workers despite promises not to during the pandemic. Just a second here. Sorry, wife. In a blog post for IPS on Monday, Anderson highlighted how deregulation of the financial industry had allowed firms to link traders' pay packages to increasingly risky investing practices that are beneficial mostly for Wall Street. And we covered a post talking about that, if I remember correctly, a few months ago. So much of what is the most rewarded on Wall Street is the kind of trading activity that really doesn't add a lot to the real economy and isn't essential, right? It's just trading numbers back and forth to make more numbers. Stonks go brrr, right? Anderson told Insider, adding that last year's huge bonuses are mostly because of market volatility, not necessarily because they've added a lot of value to the economy. Exactly. After the 2008 financial crisis, lawmakers passed the Dodd-Frank Act, which banned pay packages with inappropriate risks. But Wall Street lobbyists have successfully blocked off efforts to implement the rule for years. Right, because the rich own, our politicians and pay their paydays and stuff like that. IPS's report also examined how Wall Street had made racial and gender pay disparities worse by disproportionately hiring white male employees for decades, with people of color and women overrepresented in low-wage jobs. Nationally, securities industry employees are at 80.5% white. 5.8% Black, 11.8% Asian, 8.1% Latino. By contrast, whites make up an estimated 55% of people in jobs that pay less than $15 an hour. Okay. Men dominate top Wall Street jobs. 66. Okay, Bank of America 66%, Citi 66, 77%, JP Morgan 75, 82% Morgan Stanley. Securities industries is 63. Minimum wage workers is only 33%. For men in those positions. This is from 2020 diversity reports from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Whites dominate lucrative finance jobs. This is Bank of America. White people are 81%, Citibank 71, 77, 81, 83 Morgan Stanley, securities industry 81, and 55% of U.S. workers earning less than $15 an hour. Wall Street's risky, lucrative business models and pay practices are coming under increased scrutiny as the pandemic forces Americans to reckon with the country's growing inequality. I just hope that it will lead to a real assessment of how skewed our values are when people doing these essential jobs are paid such a pittance compared to people on Wall Street, Anderson told Insider. Yeah, they need to get rid of, honestly, just get rid of all the bonuses, get rid of all that stuff, and just pay them a flat $75,000 an hour. That's it. That's all. Yep, there we go. So that'd be one way to get a lot of people out of this work. Stop having them make millions and millions of dollars a year. $75,000 an hour, $75,000 a year, and then make sure that all that profit goes to, well, the stockholders, and then require maybe, I don't know, can we require diversification of stock? You know, half stock owned by people under, you know, certain or owned by people in certain demographics. That'd be very difficult to do. I don't know, something. So there you go. There's that. Next. Now, I know this is going to be shocking. And you're going to be just held aghast and completely and totally confused, just like I am. Like, how is this a thing? How? It just doesn't make... Forced profit sharing. How you doing, Gorilla Bear? Yeah, and that's kind of what dividends would do that. But the issue we have, that's why I was trying to think about this, is 80% of stocks are owned by like the top 10% or something like that. It's just, the issue becomes, how do we get the stock into everyday people's hands? How do we do that? That's effectively just turning over, in a sense, giving free money to people, which I don't have a problem with, to the workers. Oh, okay. Yeah, so cooperatives and employee-owned businesses. Okay, yeah, yep. That would work. So if you have a hedge fund, okay, yeah, that would be a way to do it. I worked for a company that had profit sharing, but I didn't own any stock, and it wasn't a co-op. Yeah, you can definitely have employee-owned businesses that are not co-ops. Yep, those I have in my policies. I have both of those in there as options because they are different entities. Yeah, that would be. So that would be doing it through forced profit sharing, and you would still also have to attack the payments as well to make sure that they don't get these massive bonuses, because that has to stop. So yeah, enforcing that minimum wage of like $75,000 and do profit sharing. Yeah, that's a way to do it. That's a way to do it. It was a family company, and they decided how much of the profit they were going to share with employees. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. They have to get paid, and then they pay everyone else. Give everyone else the leftovers. Hockey puck. Why didn't IOC postpone Olympics for one more year? Right? At least a year. I mean, this is fucking shocking. I mean, who'd have thunk in the middle of the pandemic, fucking COVID-19 cases were going to go up? That is, I can't even process that. How is that a thing? Yeah. Well, it's really all about money, honestly, because we had that post we covered last week that just showed all of the Olympic stadiums, stuff like that, just sitting there empty for decades and decades. I mean, some of these countries dumped $40 billion into these things, and they need to make their money back quickly. They don't care about, again, the people that they're going to murder in the process. It's all about the money. The money is why. Although that's unfortunately the whole problem we have here. It's that that brain damage that we have. Oh, thank you for the follow. How you doing today? And yeah, I've been blogging about politics for like a decade. This is my blog. I blog about anti-capitalist stuff mostly here. These are my policies here as well. I've been on policy site. Got Discord down below, and Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of stuff down there as well too, if you're interested. So yeah, and this is, I need to add this to my policies as well. Basically, I don't want to say ending the Olympics, but drastically changing how we do the Olympics if we're going to keep it. Because these countries spend billions of dollars and incredible amounts of resources to make all these stadiums and these areas to do this, and then they just sit there going to waste for decades and decades. A complete waste of money and resources and people's time. Maybe we need to look at holding it in countries that have the existing infrastructure to be able to do it. So may have to spread out the Olympics into many different countries, not just one, right? So if you've got if you're going to do skiing, maybe there'll be like 4 or 5 countries that have Olympic quality or scale skiing places available to do that, as well as at least some place for people to come and watch. So that would be one way to do it, and then also rely mostly on remote viewing for some of it, not having everyone go there to where these places are. You'll save money, you'll save resources, and it'll quit wasting so many resources and all that land, which just sits there just sitting there rotting away with all that infrastructure, all that wasted infrastructure. Such a waste. Such a waste. Okay, Tokyo adds record numbers of new COVID cases amid Olympic Games. Tokyo has reported the highest ever increase in new COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began, adding 2,848 new cases on Tuesday. Surprising. Capital's previous daily record of new cases was reported on January 7th with 2,520 new cases, according to Tokyo Metropolitan Government. The record comes amid the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games fun in its 4th day of official competition. When was this? This was just 13 hours ago. Okay. At least 160 COVID-19 cases have been reported as linked to the Tokyo 2020 Games as of Tuesday, according to Tokyo 2020 organizers. The Japanese capital is currently under a state emergency in effect until August 22. And this is even, this is even worse because of the Delta variant that's tearing through. It's going to get so much worse as people are getting infected, and it's going to put vaccinated people in there and people who are unvaccinated in the hospital, and it's just not going to be good. This is just so ridiculous. So ridiculous. But yay, there's the sociopathy of inequality and monetary systems. Murdering people for fun and profit. Yay! Oh, what'd I do? Don't want the URL up there. You want the title up there. I can do this. Seriously. Copy. Oh, it's not staying. Ah. What the hell? Alright, hold on. It's not cooperating. There you go, I got it. There we go. All right. So here, get into more yummy capitalist stuff. Revealed the true extent of America's food monopolies and who pays the price. Now up here we've got cheeseburger macaroni, 98% market share by 4 firms. Drinkable yogurt, 97 by 4. Ravioli, 94. 4 at 94. Sloppy Joe, 4 at 94. Soda, 3 by 93. 4 firms at 91%. And it's pretty much like that the whole way down. 80+% are owned by 3 or 4 companies. Baby food, 3 firms own 85%. Mayonnaise, 3 at 83%. Baby food, 3 at 82%. Soy milk, 4 at 81%. Almond milk, 4 at 81%. Should go through these so you can kind of see them. Pineapple, 4 by 75. Beer, 4 by 79. Tomato soup, 4 firms at 70%. Wine, 4 by 69. Getting to smaller numbers down here. Protein bars, 4 by 66. Salmon, 4 by 67. Salad, 4 by 68. Okay, I have to go through all these because there's a lot here. Frozen berry blends, 4 by 22. It's much lower there. All right, this is from Wednesday the 14th. This is from 2 weeks ago, Bob. Investigations show scale of big food corporations, market dominance, and political power. Again, we talk about, capitalism. Monetary systems will always result in the consolidation of power and ownership, right? So those who have money find it easier to make more money and end up buying more and more and more stuff up because they have the money and the power to do it, and they can make more money in the process. Money begets money, and if you don't have it, it's hard to get it. So this is just the consolidation of ownership is a natural result of the way capitalism works, the way monetary systems work, and it's not a bug of the system, it is a feature of the system. It's just the way it's going to work out. And much of what we are looking at fighting against in order to help make the world a better place is basically ending these harms. Most of what we set laws for in capitalism is preventing the harms that are inherent and visceral to it. A handful of powerful companies control the majority market share of almost 80% of dozens of grocery items bought regularly by ordinary Americans, new analysis reveals. A joint investigation by The Guardian and Food and Water Watch found that consumer choice is largely an illusion, despite supermarket shelves and fridges brimming with different brands. Yeah, so a lot of companies will own different brands, even different competing brands for, whatever product they sell, like different types of, colas, different types of mayonnaise, right? In fact, a few powerful transnational companies dominate every link of the food supply chain, from seeds and fertilizers to slaughterhouses and supermarkets to cereals and beers. The size, power, and profits of these mega companies have expanded thanks to political lobbying and weak regulation, which enabled a wave of unchecked mergers and acquisitions. This matters because the size and influence of these mega companies enables them to largely dictate what America's 2 million farmers grow and how much they are paid, as well as what consumers eat and how much our groceries cost. It also means that those who harvest, pack, and sell us our food have the least power, or at least half of the 10 lowest paid jobs are in the food industry. Farms and meat processing plants are among the most dangerous and exploitive workplaces in the country. Exploitative, it's like an extra set of words, letters there. Exploitative workplaces in the country. Overall, only 15 cents of every dollar we spend in the supermarket goes to farmers. The rest goes to processing and marketing our food. The Guardian and Food and Water Watch investigation into 61 popular grocery items reveals that the top companies control an average of 64% of sales. And yeah, so right here, right, the rest, so 15 cents of every dollar, the other 85 cents on the dollar goes to processing and marketing our food. So that's how much value is wasted, right? Marketing is a huge part of that lost value. All that money we spend on marketing is lost and wasted money. All that money go towards processing it, and I'm sure that shipping it, right? Because we had this, some items will be shipped like from where it is to another country to be processed, and then then back again, or to another country to be purchased. And there's just so much resources and money and time just wasted in just shipping it all over the fucking world just to get it done, when it should be, like I talk about this in my policies, right? We need to realign the way we do our entire our agricultural sector and our food sector. We need to start attempting to hyper-localize our food production, like within the same community or the same county or something like that. Instead of sending stuff all around the world, we need to keep the food locally and send it to our local places, so we don't have to worry about marketing so much, if at all. And then you save on processing, you save on shipping and all that sort of stuff. So much less wasted food and energy and resources by keeping the food locally. And then also concentrating, of course, getting rid of pesticides, shifting to organic agriculture and permaculture and that sort of a thing as well. And things will be so much better. So much waste here, and that money could be going. 85 cents could instead be going to the workers, to the people who own the farms and stuff like that, instead of being wasted here. Guardian and Food and Water. Okay, I read that. We found that for 85% of the groceries analyzed, 4 firms or fewer controlled more than 40% of market share. It's widely agreed that consumers, farmers, small food companies, and the planet lose out if the top 4 firms control 40% or more of total sales. Our investigation is based on the analysis of free market share data from thousands of supermarkets across the U.S. Now, I haven't quite gotten to the point when it comes to farming to say we need to basically nationalize or municipalize the food supply. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but maybe we need to start getting to that point. Because when we look at education, it should be government run. If we could classify it as a human right, it most likely should be run by the government, either federally or through the state or municipally or whatever, right? So that people don't have to worry about getting access to it. Food, housing, energy, right? And that sort of a thing. Internet is a big thing. But maybe I need to start looking at doing that. It is a system designed to funnel money into the hands of corporate shareholders and executives while exploiting farmers and workers and deceiving consumers about choice, abundance, and efficiency, said Amanda Starbuck, policy analyst at Food and Water Watch. The consolidation runs deep. 4 firms or fewer controlled at least 50% of the market for 79% of the groceries. For almost a third of shopping items, the top firms controlled at least 75% of the market share. Yikes. For instance, PepsiCo controls 88% of the dip market, as it owns 5 of the most popular brands, including Tostitos, Lay's, and Fritos, 93% of the sodas we drink are owned by just 3 companies. The same goes for 73% of breakfast cereals we eat, despite the shelves stacked with different boxes. Okay, so this here whole thing we're coming up here is, this annoys me. I can't see the back here, and they start throwing these things in front, but here we go. Grupo Bimbo owns 64% of the bagel and bialy market, which includes several well-known brands like Sara Lee and Thomas's. A whopping 93% of the sodas Americans drink are owned by just 3 companies. It's like Pepsi, Coke. I don't know what the other one is. Conagra owns the majority of the prepared foods, including sloppy joes, sauce, and dinner mixes. Okay, so it's showing here. Conagra owns 59%, General Mills 28%. PepsiCo owns 5 of the most popular dip brands for a total of 88% of the market. And the next highest is Boots with 1.6%. 85% of the canned tuna we eat is owned by just 4 companies. Okay, I don't recognize any of these, but top one is 45%. So yeah, bacon, 18%. Kraft Heinz, it gets much lower as we go down. Cheese, top one is 25%. Kraft Heinz. Whole milk, 8.9%. Dairy Farmers of America. So these are pretty low. So you have much more variety there. Big food is getting bigger. For shoppers, it might seem like choices galore at the store, but most of our favorite brands are actually owned by a handful of food giants, including Kraft, Heinz, General Mills, Conagra, Unilever, and Del Monte. Kraft Heinz, the result of a $63 billion mega merger in 2015, which was backed by Warren Buffett and a Brazilian private equity firm, appears 12 times in the top 4 firms for groceries, with products ranging from bacon, sour cream, and coffee to frozen meat substitutes and fruit juice. The big firms are helped by so-called category captains who represent leading brands or manufacturers and work with major retailers to decide which products get prominent spots on our supermarket shelves. And then there's the slotting fees. Payments for big brand manufacturers, payments by big brand manufacturers for eye-catching product placement. This makes it very hard for new independent brands to get a break, and when they do get a tiny foothold, it often doesn't last. Yeah, again, taking the profit motive out of food would be a huge benefit, because then it becomes not about profit, but also but giving people what they actually want, and also what is healthy or better for people in general. Because 90% of the food in our stores is there to kill us. I mean, it's literally going to kill us slowly. It's not healthy for us. For example, while hipsters and old school beer enthusiasts have contributed to a boom in local craft beers, the Belgian company Anheuser-Busch InBev acquired 17 formerly independent craft breweries between 2011 and 2020. Might not be clear to consumers from the labels, but the company owns more than 600 brands, including the mainstream favorites Budweiser, Michelob, and Beck's. Another source of confusion is private labels. Supermarkets own brands of which little is known about the producer, which appeared in the top 4 of 77% of the groceries we looked at. For frozen fruits like the mixed berries used for smoothies and desserts, private labels account for 66% of the market share, as well as 56% of refrigerated whole milk and 54% of egg sales. Which of these cereals do you think is owned by one of the 4 huge companies that dominate this market? Okay, so here we're getting into the brands we don't recognize. So Grape Nuts, obviously, Kellogg's, Post. Honey Bunches of Oats, most likely these are major brands. These Peace and Cascadian Farms and Heritage Flakes, have never heard of them. Food giants General Mills, Kellogg's, and Post own all but one of these brands. Okay, there we go. Yeah, Weetabix, I haven't heard of. Yeah, this Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Cheerios, Raisin Bran, Kashi, Bare Naked, I've heard of. Billions spent on lobbying politicians. The economic power of the corporations has contributed to their growing political power, which in turn has led to laws that put profits before food and workers' safety, consumer rights, and sustainability. During the 2020 election cycle, the food industry spent $175 million on political contributions, including lobbying by PACs and individuals and other efforts. The money came from every part of the food chain, including dairy, eggs, poultry, meat processing, farm bureaus, sugarcane, crop production, and supermarkets. About 2/3 went to Republicans. Of course they did. The 2020 total compares to just $29 million spent during the 1992 election cycle, which means lobbying by the food industry has increased by sixfold in less than 3 decades as consolidation across the supply chain has boomed. And the more money they make, the more consolidation there is, the more money they make, therefore the more they can afford to put into lobbying. Supermarket chains dominate. Less competition among agribusinesses means that higher prices and fewer choices for consumers, including where they can shop for food. Until the 1990s, many people shopped in local or regional grocery stores. Now just 4 companies, Walmart, Costco, Kroger, and Ahold Delhaize, control 65% of the retail market. And that's what it was like here. In my small town, we had Pierce's here, which was here for, when I was a kid. Then eventually, I think they're, like you're saying, the 90s, Walmart rolled in, and now Walmart is, or not Walmart. So Walmart's here, and then Pierce's is no longer a store. They were bought out by Festiva. I think it's Festiva. I think they're bought out by Festiva, so they're no longer. Pierce's is no longer here. It was bought out by Festiva. Because they basically driven out of business by Walmart. Yeah, we're small enough. We don't have a Costco, Kroger, or any of this other stuff. We just have the Walmart here. Corporate consolidation can drive up food prices and reduce access to food, said Starbucks. Supermarket mergers drive out smaller mom-and-pop grocers and regional chains. We have roughly 1/3 fewer grocery stores today than we did 25 years ago, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. We probably have less, but they're much larger. As countless mom and pop stores struggled to stay afloat during the pandemic lockdowns, revenue for Walmart hit $341 billion, almost 3% higher than the previous year. Grocery chains and superstores are also the main beneficiaries of government aid for Americans struggling to feed their families. 2020, 82% of all food stamps were spent in supermarkets and superstores like Kroger's, Walmart, Costco, and Sam's Club, which means the taxpayer contributed $64 billion to their revenue. The meat market and sticky commodities prices. A spate of mega mergers means that meatpacking plants are now controlled by just a handful of multinationals, including Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and Smithfield, now owned by the Chinese multinational WH Group. Proponents of capitalism claim mergers and acquisitions generate efficiencies that cut costs for farmers and benefit consumers by keeping prices down. Okay, but the tight grip these companies have over their industry means farmers have little choice about whom they sell to and how their animals are raised. Yeah, so it's kind of comes a double-edged sword. Sure, you have a very large company to sell to, but you also have a large company to sell to, which has an undue influence and a very unequal power dynamic into telling you how you're going to do business or how much you're going to make. Consumers pay more while profits for mega meat processors are booming. In 2020, the Brazilian firm JBS reported $51 billion in revenue, a 32% rise compared with the previous year. China is driving much of that company's growth, and JBS accounted for 50% of beef exports from the U.S. last year. The proportion of arable land dedicated to producing meat is expanding, but this is largely to feed consumers overseas. Per capita, meat production flatlined in the U.S. between 2005 and 2020, while the value of exports almost doubled. Yeah, we need to get off of meat. What is it, like 40% of the land in this country is um, that's used for agriculture is used for, or is it 40%, 50%? It's some giant number. Is used for cows and is used for making meat, a majority of which is used for just cows. We need to get off that. We need to get off cows in general because of all the land wasted on it. And it's the least efficient source of meat because you put so much water and so much food into it and you get a lot less of meat per of like protein and meat per calorie that was put into getting that meat. It's such an inefficient source of protein and meat. Consumers are also hurt by so-called sticky prices. Commodity prices can rise due to shortages caused by unexpected events such as floods or drought that disrupt the supply chain, which happened at the start of the pandemic. When this happens, supermarkets are quick to increase prices to ensure profit margins remain intact. But when commodities go down, consumer prices are often much slower to decrease, of course, because they're milking that profit. Portion of the meat market controlled by the top 4 countries. 40 years ago, about a third of the beef and pork processing industry was controlled by the top 4 firms. So 40 years ago, a third, so 30%. After a spate of mega mergers, more than 80% of beef processing and 70% of pork processing is controlled by 4 multinational giants. In 2017, these top firms had a combined annual revenue of $207 billion. Meanwhile, farmers and consumers lost out. In the past 40 years, these huge corporations have been paying farmers less and less for beef and selling it to consumers at increasing prices. Wow, good stuff. These huge companies have also been paying farmers less for pork while selling it at the same price for the past 30 years. Farmers squeezed and desperate. America's farmers have been increasingly dependent on government aid. Farmers receive $424.4 billion in subsidies between 1995 and 2020, of which 49% were for just 3 crops: corn, wheat, and soybeans. Yes. So this is a part of the problem too, that we say, hey, make corn, we'll pay you for making corn even though we don't need it. And we end up having to throw a lot of it away. Soybeans are a big problem too, because almost all of the soybeans made in this country are GMO and are using their Monsanto, right? So they're super bad for you because of the chemicals used on those. Wheat, I'm not so familiar with. I'm assuming those are probably GMO too, but I don't actually know at all. So that needs to be dealt with too. And you need to get rid of the subsidies for all these foods specifically. Get rid of them. And then add subsidies for people who are going to engage in organic and permaculture sorts of practices, and then also that engage in vertical farming. And actually make food that people want instead of having to throw away a bunch of this every year because it's not being purchased. Very little corn grown in the U.S. is eaten these days. Instead, more than 99%, yes, this is a huge problem. 99% goes into animal feed, additives like corn syrup used in sugary junk food, and increasingly ethanol, which produces toxic air pollutants when burned with gasoline. Yes, so yeah, most of the corn goes to animal feed, specifically going to cows. You need to get rid of cows. Get rid of cows. So much pollution from them. So much waste. It's a cruel paradox, according to some campaigners, as subsidies incentivize farmers to grow just a handful of cash crops, a practice that floods the market, depresses prices, and keeps them hooked on government aid. Maybe we need to nationalize farming too. Nationalize all the things. Commodity prices peaked in mid-2012 and plunged by about 50% by the end of 2019. This is good news for big corporations like meat processors as it reduces costs, but bad for many farmers. Total farm debt has reached levels not seen since the 1980s farm crisis. Advocates say that a toxic mix of financial woes, climate chaos, and trade wars have contributed to a mental health crisis among farmers. At least 450 farmers died by suicide across the 9 Midwest states between 2014 to 2018, according to the Midwest Center for Investigative Reporting. Calls to a crisis hotline operated by Farm Aid, a nonprofit agency trying to help farmers keep their land, almost doubled over that same period. In 2020, 552 farmers filed for bankruptcy, 7% fewer than the previous year, as commodity prices and government aid increased during the pandemic, but still the third highest figure over the last decade. The economic power of these corporations enables them to wield huge political influence, so we have a system in which farmers are on a treadmill and just trying to stay afloat. Basically, there's a handful of individuals in the world, mostly white men, who make money by dictating who farms, what gets farmed, and who gets to eat. Consumer choice is an illusion. The transnationals control everything in this extractive agricultural model, said Joe Maxwell, president of Family Farm Action. Less than a third of farms, mostly big ones, benefit from USDA subsidies, as part because the system has a long history of discrimination against farmers of color and small farms without the time, resources, or expertise dedicated to online applications. Food industry workers, low pay, high hazards. At least half of the 10 lowest paid jobs in the U.S. are in the food industry, and they rely disproportionately on federal benefits. Walmart and McDonald's are among the top employers of beneficiaries of food stamps and Medicaid, according to a 2020 study by a nonpartisan group, a government watchdog. Yeah, this is a big problem. Walmart is like the largest employer in the United States, and McDonald's is another massive one, and they pay so low that people need food stamps. I've gone over this story before, right? They even have Walmart has food drives for Thanksgiving just to make sure their employees have food for Thanksgiving. It's how pathetic, how little they pay their people. Even before the pandemic, farms were among the most dangerous workplaces in the country, where low-paid workers have little protection from long hours, repetitive strain injuries, exposures to pesticides, dangerous machinery, extreme heat, and animal waste. Between 50% and 75% of the country's 2.5 million farm workers are undocumented migrants who have few labor rights and limited access to occupational health care. Yeah, it's super dangerous. And so this is another reason why we probably should nationalize it, and then also shift, well, I say this in my policies, right? Shift to vertical farming for the most. I mean, we're going to have to, just because of climate change. Everything's on fire, the heat's going up, and the plants are dying. You're going to have to do it anyhow, through vertical farming or underground or something like that, some way to protect it from the massive heat and the torrential rains and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, if we don't shift to vertical farming, we're screwed. So we need to be doing that anyhow. Automate it. Have highly automated vertical farming. That's what we need to be going to. That'll take care of a lot of this. Although this also means that all these people that are working in these farms are going to lose a lot of jobs if we go to the most efficient model through vertical farming and with high levels of automation. Obviously, that doesn't work for meat packing, stuff like that. But even that, we could automate to an extent. COVID exposed and exacerbated the risks faced by frontline food workers, especially those working in meatpacking plants. As of last week, at least 558,898 meatpacking plant workers had tested positive for COVID, according to data collected by the Food and Environment Reporting Network. And many of the outbreaks led to community spread in rural areas. This is a massive undercount, as the majority of states do not collect or share data, nor do the big companies. Of course not, because why would they want to do that? Yeah, this is a big deal. Big deal. The unsafe practices that these companies have, it endangers the workers and it endangers everyone else because of the food getting contaminated. Although the processing that they do might help fix that, but still, it could possibly spread the diseases, COVID or other diseases to other places because they don't have proper protection for the workers. Meatpacking industry is much more dangerous now than in the 90s, and the biggest factors are consolidation and cutting corners of worker safety, said Debbie Berkowitz, director of the Worker and Health and Safety Program at the National Employment Law Project. Yeah, and of course, like we always talk about, right? In order to make profits, they're going to do everything they can to keep making profits, and part of that is going to be increasing prices and cutting costs. You're cutting costs by decreasing safety. And this is going to be a thing that's always going to happen while you have profit as the primary motive for how businesses work. It's that tension issue that I always talk about. Environmental impacts. About half of the planet's land and 70% of fresh water withdrawals are for farming, which is increasingly industrialized. Okay, so again, with this farming, we need to shift to vertical farming because so much water gets wasted with farming, especially with cows, right? Again, get rid of cows, get rid of them, because so much of our resources is wasted on them. You shift to vertical farming, it uses 1/10 of the land, 1/10 of the water, right? I mean, that just that water savings alone is huge. And then they can make food all year round. They make 10 times the amount of food as they do 10 times the amount of food in the same amount of land. So, 1/10, if you take any given farm, take 10% of the land, turn it into a vertical farm, especially if you can make it high, several stories, and you'll make the same amount of food as you did on that full plot. That it can make that food year round, not just during the 3-month, 4-month growing season. You got food all year round for your community. It's amazing. Of course, the capital outlay for something like this is much higher. And so is the technical knowledge required to do it. And you're also, because a lot more of it's going to be automated, there's going to be a lot of jobs lost in this process of, highly automating our food and doing it in a more efficient way. But that, the fact that we're losing jobs, that is an issue that is only an issue because of capitalism. Because if you don't work, you die in the streets. Which is why UBI, universal healthcare, and universal education has to be a thing we need to do. Industrial agriculture is focused on extracting maximum profits for minimum costs, an exploitative model with grave consequences for animal welfare, water, land, and global heating. Exactly, and that's what I'm saying here. Shift to vertical farming. That's what we have to do. We have to do it because climate change, not only because it's more efficient and we can get food for longer, but also because climate change is going to burn up all the crops here in the next decade or so. We're not going to be able to, it's going to be very difficult to grow food. Agriculture is responsible for more than 1/4 of global greenhouse gas emissions, making food production a major contributor to the climate crisis. Across the board, the carbon footprint for animal-based foods, beef, lamb, chicken, cheese, is higher than for plant-based food, which is mostly due to the consequence of deforestation to create space to grow feed crops, fertilizer used for these crops, and methane emissions. Yeah, exactly. So again, getting rid of meat, especially beef specifically, just getting rid of beef specifically would be huge. We would reclaim so much land and so many of the problems caused by it. Despite the community, environmental, and economic benefits of supporting local sustainable producers, transporting food is a very small contributor to greenhouse gases. It's really what you eat, not where it comes from, that's key to reducing your dietary carbon footprint, okay? Here in the US, there were 1.6 billion animals living on 25,000 factory farms in 2017, a 14% rise in just 5 years. Together, these animals produce 885 billion pounds of manure annually, equivalent to the human sewage generated by residents of 30 New York cities. Incentivizing farmers to grow the same crops has reduced the productivity of some of the country's most fertile lands, as monocropping depletes soil of nutrients and can lead to significant erosion. Yep, so that's a huge problem. It's another one of those major problems. Yeah, and crop rotation is going to be huge. You can go also getting into biochar and that sort of a thing to help increase the quality of the land. And yeah, if you had much more centralized control of the farmland in the area, right, you could have each farmer do something, just cycle through different foods, like go all the way around between the entire thing. Grow the same foods. You can grow the same foods every year, but each farmer will be growing something different. And then you can help maintain the health of the soil. The practice requires synthetic fertilizers to compensate for the lost nutrients and pesticides to combat fungi and insect predators that thrive in these conditions. Indigenous and subsistence farmers have always rotated multiple crops because it's the best way of ensuring healthy soils and good yields. Yep. And again, shifting to vertical farming will help prevent this whole problem here. Pesticides and insects. That prevents most of this problem right there. Agricultural runoff is now responsible for 80% of excessive nutrients in our fresh waters and oceans. That's responsible for pretty much the algal blooms that you'll see, which cause dense growth of plant life like algae that block oxygen from reaching fish and other animals, right? Creating massive dead zones. Another reason to get off large-scale agriculture like this, shift to vertical farming, getting rid of cows. Those will be huge. In 2019, agriculture and aquaculture were identified as a threat to 24,000 and of the almost 28,000 species threatened with extinction, according to IUCN Red List. Aquaculture. Okay, that's interesting. What can be done? In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon's agriculture secretary told farmers to get big or get out. Rude. This investigation has examined the far-reaching consequences of government support, political and economic, for big corporations that now dominate every part of the food chain. Last week, Joe Biden signed an executive order to tackle the rampant concentration across the U.S. economy, including food and farming. Biden called on government agencies to enforce existing antitrust laws and consider rolling back recent mega mergers, which boosted profits and power for a handful of corporations while hurting the rest of us. Well, if they would just fucking not have let it happen in the first place, this would be less of an issue. Well, borderline. The order specifically directs the USDA to take swift action to protect farmers, including by making it easier for them to sue meat processors for alleged abuses. Okay, well that's not so much. The problems in the current system run deep. From farm to fork, America's food system has been rooted in the exploitation of women, Native Americans, and people of color. This is at the heart of capitalist food politics. Big corporations take as much as they can and paying as little as possible for it, said Raj Patel, academic and author of Stuffed and Starved: Markets, Power, and the Hidden Battle for the World's Food System. In addition to executive actions, which could be overturned by the next president, such deep-rooted injustices need sweeping reforms by Congress. But bills banning new mega mergers and factory farms currently lack bipartisan support, despite public opinion and supporting them. Yeah, and municipalizing the farming would be one way to do that. As much as you can. Municipalizing them and shifting to the vertical farming. That's what needs to be done. And I kind of had that question here. Like last year or the year before, they were considering getting organic food for our school district, which is awesome, but they just didn't have the infrastructure or something to go ahead and do it. And that shouldn't be a problem. There shouldn't be a problem with getting access to organic food. That should be the default. But, you know, again, they could work with some of the local farms and say, hey, we would like this much, we have this much food of this sorts we need throughout the year. Can you provide it? And then, you know, it might take several years to get that stuff to line up, make sure you can purchase it on the scale needed so that they can pay for it. But if we had much stronger levels of government support, like county or state or federal, for that sort of a thing, it would be much easier to do. It's time to support small-scale regenerative farms, regional food hubs, and grocery co-ops, according to Starbucks. Alternatives already exist. We just need to boost public funding and resources to help sustainable, affordable, and more equitable food systems take grip. Okay, just what I've been talking about. Yep. If you municipalize them a bit, especially on the federal level, you can allow much smaller farms to be a thing. And if you put the funding there to support vertical farming, you know, like giving a grant. So let's say you got someone who has 100 acres. Say, hey, what we want you to do is we're going to give you, you know, here's a few $1 million, build a vertical farm. And then what we want you to do is to wild, you know, the rest of those, that 90%, or at least, you know, 70% of that, the rest of that land, wild it, plant trees, prairie grasses, you know, whatever, just return it to wild green, and then just use your vertical farm. So the government can subsidize the initial, some of the initial capital outlay required to build this massive multi-acre farm, right? Massive multi-acre vertical farm. And then after that, they get started, and then they are able to produce food year round and quickly make that money back that they would have dumped into, the capital outlay required to do it. Okay, there you go. Questions, comments, suggestions, thoughts? There you go. So many problems with capitalism. Here's some more. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to finish this, but we'll get at least a start on this. All right, this is from July 25th. Okay, so it's just from a few days ago. It's from The Guardian again. How long is this? It's a bit long. We're probably not going to finish this, but this we'll get you started on it at least. All right, the insect apocalypse. Our world will grind to a halt without them. Insects have declined by 75% in the past 50 years, and the consequences may soon be catastrophic. Biologist Dave Goulson reveals the vital services they perform. Yeah, and then pollination is a huge part of this, right? And if we lose our pollinators, we lose, 60% of our food supply? 70% of our food supply? Something like that? I mean, it's an incredible amount. Climate change and pollution has been a large part of destroying that. Plus, also, I expect the pollution from like radio waves. All the wireless, the cellular, the radio, the TV and stuff being put over the airwaves, that has an impact on it, especially when it's very localized. Very close to the ground and that sort of thing. That will, I'm fairly sure will have a significant impact on the insect life and animal life as well. The radiation. I have been fascinated by insects all my life. One of my earliest memories is of finding, at the age of 5 or 6, some stripy yellow and black caterpillars feeding on weeds in the school playground. I put them in my empty lunchbox and took them home. Eventually they transformed into handsome magenta and black moths. They seemed like magic to me, and still does. I was hooked. In pursuit of insects, I have traveled the world from the deserts of Patagonia to the icy peaks of Fjordland in New Zealand and the forested mountains of Bhutan. I've watched clouds of bird-winged butterflies sipping minerals from the banks of a river in Borneo, and thousands of fireflies flashing in synchrony at night in the swamps of Thailand. At home in my garden in Sussex, I have spent countless hours watching grasshoppers court a mate and see off rivals. Earwigs tend their young, ants milk honeydew from aphids, and leafcutter bees snip leaves to line their nests. But I am haunted by the knowledge that these creatures are in decline. It is 50 years since I first collected those caterpillars in the school playground. And every year that has passed, there have been slightly fewer butterflies, fewer bumblebees, fewer of almost all of the myriad little beasts that make the world go round. These fascinating and beautiful creatures are disappearing, ant by ant, bee by bee, day by day. Estimates vary and are imprecise, but it seems likely that insects have declined in abundance by 75% or more since I was 5 years old. Scientific evidence for this grows stronger every year as studies are published describing the collapse of monarch butterfly populations in North America, the demise of woodland and grassland insects in Germany, or the seeming inexorable contraction of the ranges of bumblebees and hoverflies in the UK. In 1963, 2 years before I was born, Rachel Carson warned us in her book, Silent Spring, that we were doing terrible damage to our planet. She'd weep to see how much worse it has become. Insect-rich wildlife habitats such as hay meadows, marshes, heathlands, and tropical rainforests have been bulldozed, burned, or plowed to destruction on a vast scale. The problems with pesticides and fertilizers, she highlighted, will have become far more acute, with an estimated 3 million tons of pesticides now going into the global environment every year. Some of these new pesticides are thousands of times more toxic to insects than any that existed in Carson's day. The soils have been degraded, rivers choked with silt and polluted with chemicals. Climate change, a phenomenon unrecognized in her time, is now threatening to further ravage our planet. These changes have all happened in our lifetime, on our watch, and they continue to accelerate. Now, it definitely wasn't unrecognized in her time. I mean, it may not have been big news, but we've known about climate change since like 1830s or something like that. It's been talked about and published every so often over the decades. So we've known about it for at least 100 years since that time. Few people seem to realize how devastating this is, not only for human well-being. We need insects to pollinate our crops, recycle dung, leaves, and corpses, keep the soil healthy, control pests, and much more. But for larger animals such as birds, fish, and frogs, which rely on insects for food, that's also a very big thing, because they are the very kind of, not the bottom, but the close to the bottom of the food chain, right? If they go away, everything else goes away above them that feeds off them. Increasingly, most of us live in cities and grow up seeing few insects other than houseflies, mosquitoes, and cockroaches, so the majority of us don't much like insects. Many people are terrified of them. They are often referred to as creepy crawlies or bugs, unpleasant, scuttling, dirty creatures living in filth and spreading disease. Few therefore appreciate how vitally important insects are to our own survival, and fewer still how beautiful, clever, fascinating, mysterious, and wonderful insects are. It's supposed to be that leafcutter bee? Yeah, leafcutter bee. Oh, look at me, so fuzzy. Look at me, fuzzy. Got a leaf there. A leaf cut out there, taking to his hive. Insects have been around for a very long time. Their ancestors evolved up in the primordial ooze of the ocean floors 500 million years ago. They make up the bulk of known species on our planet. Ants alone outnumber humans by 1,000,000 to 1. So if we were to lose many of our insects, overall biodiversity would of course be significantly reduced. Moreover, given their diversity and abundance, it is inevitable that insects are intimately involved in all terrestrial and freshwater food chains and food webs. Caterpillars, aphids, caddisfly larvae, and grasshoppers are herbivores, for instance, turning plant material into a tasty insect protein that is far more easily digested by larger animals. Others, such as wasps, ground beetles, and mantises, occupy the next level of food chain. As predators of the herbivores, all of them are prey for a multitude of birds, bats, spiders, reptiles, amphibians, small mammals, and fish, which would have little or nothing to eat if it weren't for insects. In their turn, the top predators, such as sparrowhawks, herons, and osprey, that prey on the insectivorous starlings, frogs, shrews, and salmon, would themselves go hungry without insects. This loss of insect life from the food chain would not just be catastrophic for wildlife, it would also have direct consequences for the human food supply. Most Europeans and North Americans are repulsed by the prospect of eating insects, which is odd since we happily consume prawns, which are broadly similar, but being segmented and with an external skeleton. Right, they're water bugs, right? Giant water bugs. Our ancient ancestors certainly would have eaten insects, and globally, eating insects is the norm. Roughly 80% of the world's population regularly consume them, with the practice very common in South America, Africa, and Asia, and among the indigenous peoples of Oceania. Yeah, and this is something we really kind of need to look into a bit more. I mean, evolutionarily, especially when we were hunter-gatherers, right? 12,000 years ago, and before those several 100,000 years ago, where, quote, Homo sapiens have existed, eating nuts and berries and mushrooms and bugs, right? And whatever, and some meat was the norm. And bugs are something that I say in my policies that we need to look at trying to grow on a mass scale because they take up a little bit of space, right? So it should be mushrooms, bugs, right? Hemp, honey, and algae. Then you can throw in berries and seeds and nuts in there too, right? Those are some of the most nutrient dense food sources that you can make, and at least they, like the algae and the mushrooms and the insects and the vertical farms, can all be done on one area. Like some of the refuse from the farm itself can be fed to mushrooms, and maybe bugs can live in that, or bugs can be fed some of that or some of the mushrooms, right? You could have some sort of an ecosystem that you can create to grow all those things, and then you can take those bugs and grind them up and turn them into a meal. Like you can even go on Kickstarter and find like grasshopper meal or some other sorts of bug-based things. There's I backed a Kickstarter that you can take your organic waste and put in the machine, and then meal bugs will be created, will grow in there, and then the meal bugs will be put into a different area, and then you grind them up into a powder, and then you put that into, it's like a bug meal that you can put on your food, which is highly nutritious for you. That sort of stuff we need to be doing. Strong argument can be made that humans ought to farm more insects as an alternative to pigs, cows, and chickens. Yep, what I'm saying. Farming insects is more energy efficient and requires less space and water. That's what I'm saying. They're a healthier source of protein, being high in essential amino acids and lower in saturated fats than beef. We are much less likely to catch disease from eating insects. Think bird flu, COVID-19. So if we wish to feed 10 to 12 billion people who are projected to be living on our planet by 2050, we should be taking the farming of insects seriously as a healthy source of protein and a more sustainable option to conventional livestock. What have I been saying? What have I been saying? Yes, that's exactly right. Exactly right. Now the numbers I've seen here for population, I don't think we'll get to 10 to 12 billion. I think it'll peak at about 10 billion, like 9 billion. No, what was it? I can't remember. I need to look at that. Oh, hold on. Oh. I don't remember what those numbers were. While Western societies may not eat insects, we do regularly consume them at one step removed in the food chain. Freshwater fish such as trout and salmon feed heavily on insects, as do game birds like partridge, pheasant, and turkey. Aside from their role as food, insects perform a plethora of other vital services in ecosystems. For example, 87% of all plant species require annual pollination, most of it delivered by insects. The colorful petals, scent, and nectar of flowers evolved to attract pollinators. Without pollination, wildflowers would not set seed, and most would eventually disappear. There would be no cornflowers or poppies, foxgloves, or forget-me-nots. But an absence of pollinators would have a far more devastating ecological impact than just the loss of wildflowers. Approximately 3/4 of the crop types we grow also require pollination by insects, and if the bulk of plant species could no longer set seed and died out, then every community on the land would be profoundly altered and impoverished, given that plants are the basis of every food chain. Again, this is why we need to start shifting to vertical farming. The importance of insects is often justified in terms of the ecosystem services they provide, which can be ascribed a monetary value. Pollination alone is estimated to be worth between 235 and 577 billion a year worldwide. These calculations aren't very accurate, hence the wide differences between the two figures. Financial aspects aside, we could not possibly feed the growing global human population without pollinators. We could produce enough calories to keep us alive, since wind-pollinated crops such as wheat, barley, rice, and maize comprise the bulk of our food, but living exclusively on a diet of bread, rice, and porridge would quickly see us succumb to deficiencies of essential vitamins and minerals. Imagine a diet without strawberries, chili peppers, apples, cucumbers, cherries, black currants, pumpkins, tomatoes, coffee, raspberries, courgettes, runner beans, and blueberries, to name a few. The world already produces fewer fruit and vegetables than we would than would be needed if everybody on the planet were to have a healthy diet. Without pollinators, it would be impossible to produce anywhere near the 5 a day fruit and veg we all need. Insects are also intimately involved in the breakdown of organic matter, such as fallen leaves, timber, and animal feces. This is vitally important work, for it recycles the nutrients, making them available once more for plant growth. Most decomposers are never noticed. For example, your garden soil, and particularly your compost heap, if you have one, almost certainly contains countless millions of springtails. These minute, primitive relatives of insects, often less than 1 millimeter long, are named for their clever trick of firing themselves as high as 100 millimeters into the air to escape predators. This army of minuscule high jumpers does an important job, nibbling on tiny fragments of organic matter and helping to break them up into even smaller pieces, which are then further decomposed by bacteria, releasing the nutrients for plants to use. Looking off and on today, got some work. Okay, well, thanks for stopping by, Girly Bear. I really appreciate that. Have a great evening, and I'll be getting done here in a little bit too, so thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you. Other insects, the undertakers of the natural world, are similarly efficient at disposing of dead bodies. With uncanny speed, flies such as bluebottles and greenbottles locate corpses within minutes of death, laying masses of eggs that hatch within hours into maggots that race to consume the carcass before other insects arrive. Okay, that's just pleasant. Their relatives, the flesh flies, have an edge in this race, as they give birth directly to maggots, skipping the egg stage entirely. Burying and carrion beetles arrive next and consume both the corpse and the developing maggots. Burying beetles drag the corpse of small animals underground, laying their eggs on them, then remain to care for their offspring. This sequence of events is sufficiently predictable, even to be used by forensic entomologists to judge the approximate time of death of human corpses when the circumstances of death are suspicious. Good stuff. On top of all this, burrowing, soil-dwelling insects help to aerate the soil. Ants disperse seeds, carrying them back to their nest to eat, but often losing a few, which can then germinate. Silk moths give us silk, and honeybees give us honey. In total, the ecosystem services provided by insects are estimated to be worth $57 billion a year in the US alone. Although this is a pretty meaningless calculation, since, as E.O. Wilson once said, without insects, the environment would collapse into chaos and billions would starve. Yeah, that's exactly right. American biologist Ehrlich likened the loss of species from an ecological community to randomly popping out rivets from a wing of an airplane. Remove 1 or 2 and the plane will probably be fine. Remove 10 or 20 or 50 at some point, and at some point we are entirely unable to predict. There will be a catastrophic failure and the plane will fall from the sky. Insects are the rivets that keep the ecosystem functioning. Yeah, and this is why we look at shifting to vertical farming and rewilding the rest of the farming area into wild grasslands or forest or something like that will help to deal with this, right? We need to deal with this, and shifting to vertical farming and rewilding the rest of the lands is. Oh, it's your birthday? Oh, happy birthday! Congratulations, making it another year. Yeah, I stopped counting my birthday. God, my late 20s or something like that. Late 20s and 30s. It's just, it's another year. I survived. I don't count them so much, but I still take a week of vacation off for my birthday to mostly read. But yeah, what are you doing? Anything special today? I mean, hopefully not my last. Yeah, that would be bad. The alternative to celebrating your birthday is not a good one. Yeah. I mean, we're in COVID and all that. There isn't work, watch Twitch. Okay, well, I hope you have an amazing day and watch some amazing streamers. I know you're here, so it's got to be pretty great. But yeah, have a great night and happy birthday. Enjoy your work. Hopefully that goes amazingly. It doesn't cause you problems. And your twitching is amazing. Awesome. Glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. And happy birthday. Actually, it is 7 o'clock, so I'm not going to read the rest of this. There's a bit more here. Go ahead and read it. I need to read it too. But this is super important. There's so much good stuff here. Everyone, yeah, if you have any last minute comments for the day, let me know, and we'll call this a day here in a little bit. All right, after I get done here, I have to get my girl somewhere. Nothing, anybody? All right, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great week. Again, if you want to support me, I got Patreon down below. Oh, it's okay. You saw more, I think, saw more than you normally do. I usually get here towards the end. You got here towards the beginning sometimes, so that was cool. It was good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Every second you give me, I really do appreciate. I really do. So have a great night. Yes, so yeah, if you want to support me, I've got Patreon down below and donations, and I've got my blog and website and all that sort of stuff there, so you can get hold of me through Facebook and whatever else there too. So, all right, everyone, have a great evening, and we'll see you guys later. Again, happy birthday.
Just me and you, let's make up all the rules. Count to 10 and 1.